Well, good morning, everyone. We have a treat for you this morning. We are going to feast on carbon. Now, most of the time we feast on carbohydrates and we drive on hydrocarbons, but today we're going for pure carbon. We're going to have a discussion about carbon and how we capture carbon using nature and using technology. And we have some extraordinary experts in this field and leaders in this field that you're going to meet in just a couple of minutes. Now, atmospheric carbon is now at, I think, about 430 parts per million. I remember years and years of watching as it gradually rose from 350 to 400, and I thought that was the point at which it was going to begin to narrow down, but it is continuing to grow, and it will grow for centuries to come unless we can make the turn to an economy that drives carbon down, and that not just reduces the emissions, but actually draws carbon out of the environment. So that's what we're going to talk about. That's what we're going to talk about today. We have three folks who are going to be joining us. I'm going to tell you about the latter two, and then I'll tell you about our first guest in a moment. Jim Blackburn is the CEO of a nonprofit company called B Carbon. B Carbon is focused on soil carbon sequestration and on a carbon credit registry that enables farmers and ranchers and those who care for our soil to develop an additional profit center around carbon. And we have James Clements III, and I must emphasize the third because James comes from two family lines that extend 150 years in the ranching and farming and ag business, including King Ranch, many of you know about. And James is a leader in carbon sequestration as well as the CEO of Earth Optics, which has a variety of sophisticated sensing equipment, lab analysis capabilities, soil sampling, and so on, that also can help to quantify the value of carbon in soil. Now, agriculture can either be the largest contributor to global warming, as it is right now by many estimates, or it can be the largest solution to global warming, and the difference is the quality and the health of the soil that we use in this system. So regenerative agriculture that keeps that soil doing what it does, absorbing carbon, is a key component of this. But the first person I'm going to introduce here, and actually before I do that, let me just mention as a plug for the continuing discussion. This discussion is a part of a new initiative called Circle America, which we will launch tomorrow. And for those of you who are interested, I hope you will join us in the Coronado Room A all day tomorrow. I think it's 9 to 5. And we are going to have discussions about all of the possibilities of a circular economy, an economy that works like nature, an economy that keeps materials in flow, not the way we do, just through mechanical recycling, but the way nature does, continuing to use materials, separate the materials apart, bring them back together in new forms, new innovations that yield new qualities. It's an exciting, new, optimistic realm, and I hope you'll all join us for it. This is the beginning discussion of that. And the first person that I am going to be introducing in just a minute is Vicki Hollub, who rose through the ranks at Occidental Petroleum. She is a lifelong operator within Occidental Petroleum, now the CEO of Occidental Petroleum, but she has served in every level of the company, and so she knows this industry from start to finish, and she has a vision of the future of the industry and of her company that she has systematically been shaping and forming and buying and selling elements of the company to bring together, I think, a new business model that she will tell you about. It's an exciting arena. So let me, first of all, bring out our first guest, and we're going to have a little conversation with Vicki Hollub, the CEO of Occidental. Please welcome her. Well, Vicki, I have watched we've met several times in the past, but I have watched you from afar in the industry, and You are a remarkable CEO. Of course, you know, it's obvious you are a woman leading an enterprise that is male-dominated in an industry that's male-dominated. And I know you have a particular approach, a particular style that combines collaboration and clear decision-making. And you are not afraid to make clear decisions for the future of the company and to put up with all of the naysayers who might say, well, you should be carrying the company in this direction or this direction. You have directed the company with a vision and a clarity that most CEOs, I think, lack. And you are able to deal with the consequences of that. Tell us a story about how you were able to develop that skill.
Well, I grew up in the state of Alabama, and in the state of Alabama, if you were among those who were more enlightened, you were an Alabama fan, football fan. The others chose the school from West Georgia. But Bear Bryant, I was fortunate that Bear Bryant took over as coach at the University of Alabama the year before I was born and stayed at Alabama until after I'd graduated. So I had this long period of studying a person who was able to be successful and sustain success. And what he taught me, because I studied him thoroughly, he taught me that to do any job, you've got to really prepare for it. You've got to, and his football players, he would make sure that in practice, that he had a real game atmosphere, and he wanted the players to play like they were playing their last play, and it was in a real game that meant the national championship. So the intensity had to be there. And so the persistence, the intensity, and the desire to be successful was instilled in me by him. And so I took it into my profession and tried to emulate what it took to be successful on the football field and translate it to the business world. And first through technical things. I was an engineer, I was still an engineer, but I was in engineering and operations, and I loved it. And what it also helped me to do is on the first job that I went out on, I was sent out to the field in South Louisiana to do a workover on a well. I pulled up on location, only men there. I got out of the car, and they looked at me like, why are you here? But after I was able to spend some time with them, and we started talking about football, and they knew that I knew more about their coach, Charlie McClendon, than they did. That broke the ice for me, and that continued to help me throughout my entire career because people in the South, just as you know, love football, and that was something that helped me connect, and it's something that helped me build a bridge that made it possible for that collaboration to happen.
How do you sustain it when you are the center of attention and when you are the center of controversy? I mean, you've purchased Anadarko, you've purchased Net Power, you've created a different kind of company, you've let certain assets go, and so on. How are you able to make those decisions, even though there are always going to be people who are saying, well, she should have sold this, she should have done this, and so on? How do you deal with that?
Well, first of all, we have an incredibly good team at Occidental, and we know what we're doing. We have a lot of expertise in the subsurface and in the oil and gas industry, and we're differentiated from many other companies in our industry in that we really have a focus also on enhanced oil recovery, not just primary recovery from our wells. And so we knew the assets. We had studied Anadarko for 2 years. We knew it very well. We knew our competition didn't know it as well. That's why we could come out on top there. Now, what I've figured out is that when you know you've made the right decision and you know that it's going to be the best thing for the company, it's a lot easier to deflect the criticism because you know ultimately you're going to make it through. They're going to see what's happened and where you are. And now it's taken a while. Yeah. We went through about 4 or 5 rough years to get to the point where we've totally transformed our company. So these purchases and sales now has us left with the best portfolio that our company has ever had. And when I took over, we were 50% of our production was in international, we now have 84% of our production is in the United States. So geopolitically, we're in a lot better shape than some of the companies that are having to deal with the Strait of Hormuz and those kind of things today.
Yeah.
We have 3 countries internationally that we're in. Oman is the biggest, and we don't have to worry about the strait. They're outside the strait. So geopolitically, we achieved our target. And then by doing all this, we now have the highest margin assets we've ever had. And we've gone from 668,000 barrels a day in 2015 to 1.4 million barrels a day today. We've gone from a company that had 8 billion of oil and gas, 8 billion BOE of oil and gas resources to now 16.5. So we've more than doubled our resource, more than doubled our production, and now we've gotten our debt down to a point where it's lower than what even the pro formas companies were when we made the deals. So we're in the best place that we've ever been, and the differentiation is something I think we're going to talk about later, is using CO2 to get the most out of these reservoirs. And so it's we're finally, our teams are getting the recognition that they need to for having a high level of technical excellence. And it wasn't just about the portfolio. You can take a great portfolio and mess it up, but you've got to have a great technical team too that can get the most out of those reservoirs, and we do, fortunately.
Yeah. Now, how would you describe what's the elevator pitch that differentiates Occidental from others in the industry? Are you an oil and gas company? How would you best describe it?
Well, we feel like we're a carbon management company because what we're doing is managing hydrocarbons and managing CO2 to get those hydrocarbons. So we're, and more than anything else, we're a technical company. We're a technical company that specializes in doing what we can do in oil and gas and CO2 to make the most value that we can get for our shareholders.
Now, to my simple mind, I see the company as kind of doing 3 things. Tell me if I'm right, and then tell us why that package of things works. You are an oil and gas production company, you are a carbon storage company, and you are also an enhanced oil recovery company. How do those 3 elements go together? Is my description accurate? And how does that work as a business opportunity?
Well, Oxy's always been a company that could get more oil out of the ground than other companies. And in oil and gas, there's primary production where you drill a well, you perforate casing to reach the reservoir that you're trying to get the oil out of. And a lot of companies, oil and gas companies, have to do that to access the resource. But we go beyond that. Once we've done that, we then, in many cases, apply water flooding after that to move more oil through the reservoir into a producing well. We use steam flood. We have one of the largest steam floods in the world in Oman. So steam flood is using steam as a way to get heavier oil, more viscous oil out of the reservoirs. And then we for 50 years have been doing CO2 flooding, which is to put CO2 in the oil reservoir to get what you can't get out with just primary production. So when you are producing a well and you're trying to lift the oil out of the wellbore from the reservoir, you can only get so much. Then you get no more. But CO2 acts in the reservoir like your champagne bottle does, or your Coke bottle. You shake it up, and if you try to open it, then it's going to spew everywhere. So it kind of energizes whatever fluid it's in, whether it's champagne, it's Coke, or it's oil. When we put the CO2 there, it lowers the viscosity, increases the pressure in the reservoir, and helps to make that oil then move, lowers the viscosity. And also, the other thing it does is it gets into the little tiny pores that otherwise an oil molecule could not get out of because of its size of the molecule and the viscosity. So that CO2 gets in that small pore, pushes the oil out, so you get that oil too. And then it's like, have you ever had people pull up into your driveway and dump a bunch of oil on it with their car sitting there? Well, the only way you could get that up would potentially be with CO2. Don't try it. But if you use CO2 on that driveway, you might could get that oil up, because in the reservoir, CO2 acts like a soap, and it kind of makes the oil come off the rocks easier that's in the reservoir and moves it to the producer. So CO2 is the most proven next step to get oil out of reservoirs that we have in our industry. And it's a part of our strategy to do that. And while we're doing that, that CO2 that went into that small molecule or small pore, it stays there. It never comes out. So it is forever sequestered in that reservoir.
Yeah. Yeah, so there is an actual, this is what I didn't understand until recently. I thought, well, we're injecting CO2 into these wells, and the pressure of that CO2, like pressure from anything, is forcing the oil out, but that's not the case. It's actually, there's a chemical reaction between the CO and the oil resource, and it's flowing. It flows out because of that.
But you're right about one thing. It does need a certain pressure for it to become miscible in the oil.
Okay. So it becomes chemically connected to the oil, essentially, and then the oil flows out, the carbon remains.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. So tell us, there are, of course, in any activist community, there's kind of an ideal that people have in their mind about the way we should solve this problem. And a lot of people, maybe simplify the world to say, well, we got to move to a world that has zero oil and gas, and we're going to start in our country and make sure that our country isn't producing any oil and gas. And you talk about carbon capture, and they say, well, okay, they can capture carbon. I like that part of it, but I don't like the enhanced oil recovery. I don't like, that they are also producing more oil out of the same wells. What do you say to them? How do those fit together? Could you do carbon capture without the enhanced oil recovery?
Well, I feel like to me, I get frustrated with both extremes. Mm-hmm. You have the extremes that are really too far right. You have the too far left. You have the people that can't figure out a way to meet in the middle. And we were talking about this back behind stage. But the reality is that I one time was at Davos, and I asked one of the primary authors of the Paris Accord, and I asked her, I said, if we could produce oil with zero emissions, wouldn't that be okay with you? And she said no. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't the emissions that were upsetting her. Yeah. It was just the production of oil and gas. And that's crazy. Yeah. That's not the way we should be. What we all need to do is work toward trying to make sure that the world has the most affordable oil or energy that we can provide, while also working to get our emissions down and working to reduce the CO2 that's already in the atmosphere. We need to do that. And we actually can produce a net zero barrel of oil by injecting this CO2 into the reservoir, because it takes more CO2 injected into the reservoir than what the incremental oil that CO2 generates will emit when used.
So a real net zero oil and gas is technically doable, and you are doing it through this process right now.
Yes. And
so if we want to focus on carbon pollution as our goal to reduce, rather than wiping out an industry or playing favorites, this is one technology set that can do the job.
Absolutely.
Now, it can be difficult, of course, siting facilities and even siting transportation routes and so on in today's litigious society and in today's hyper-polarized society. At the community level, sometimes you have folks on the right and sometimes you have folks on the left that say, we don't want any of these facilities and we don't want carbon capture. There's a fear of carbon, and I'm not quite sure why. I don't want to chuckle at it, because I know that there are some legitimate issues, like in Louisiana, I think, that concern residents. But how do we change this and this is quite a big question. I don't expect you to have the magic answer for us, but how do we change this dynamic of people on both sides being so easily triggered to oppose and stop when we really need solutions to be implemented in order to overcome these challenges?
Well, what we're trying to do is just events like this, is trying to share our story and trying to help people understand technically how it works. And most of the time, when we're talking with people who really are focused on trying to solve the world's challenges with this, rather than just having an ideological focus on what they believe to be something evil, which is oil and gas, those people that are logical and reasonable and care about the world, care about the earth, care about what our grandchildren and their grandchildren are going to have to live through, those are the people that will come to the table and listen and try to understand. And so we've had some of that. We've had some success with some of that. We actually had a group of people in our conference room one time when we were working on 45Q and trying to get a way to make that more helpful for us to be able to advance technology. And they were environmentalists, and they were part of the Carbon Coalition. They were sitting there, and one of them came and told me that he never expected to be sitting in the conference room of an oil and gas company, but he was there because he cared. He cared about the world. He wanted to learn, wanted to know, and wanted to help us.
Yeah, it's tremendous. I think that's what happens when people actually meet people, human beings, and they gain a sense of trust. Then I think they can find possibilities that they didn't think existed before, and they can move from a position of kind of panic, that we have to do everything right now, to hope, to, okay, I can see how we all fit into the puzzle here.